Hey everybody, it's Seth. Hope you had a Merry Christmas. We are out on vacation this week, so I went back to the archives and pulled this little gem from back in July. I hope you enjoy it.
Check. 1, 2, 3. The D. Brief. This is the D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit.
Your guide to Detroit's
arts and entertainment scene.
This is the D
Brief.
Hello and welcome to the Debrief. I am your co-host. My name is Seth Ressler.
I'm Becky Scarcello.
And I'm Jag.
And it is, of course, Thursday again, which means we've got another in-depth conversation with somebody who has made Detroit such a wonderful city. We have a legend here with us this week. And I know you're really excited, Becky.
Oh, yeah. She's my shero.
Absolutely. You're wearing the T-shirt and
Yep.
everything. If you
Proudly.
have ever seen a T-shirt that says "Say Nice Things About Detroit" or a bumper sticker.
I have one of the bumper
Magnet.
stickers.
So do I. It's in
Yep.
my Airbnb room that we're renting out to other people who come and visit the city.
So they will say nice things about Detroit?
That they will say nice things about Detroit. And of course, that's what we do here on this podcast. All we do is say nice things about Detroit.
For the most part.
It's always signed by Emily, and we have the Emily with us, Emily T. Gail, co-creator of the Say Nice Things About Detroit movement. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
Well, I love it. I listen to your podcast, and I just think that you've got such a great energy. It's pretty obvious that you all do your homework before the guests get here. And just that you got a great enthusiasm when you're doing the show. I love that you will acknowledge that you just moved here to Detroit, and the ones that you've been downriver.
Yeah,
Becky. Each of you have this background that you bring to the show, and it really makes a nice tapestry.
Well, I think it's funny how I'm sort of the middleman on this continuum here, where Becky grew up here and Seth moved here 2-3 years ago now.
Yeah, 3 years ago now.
And I first came here in 2011, left in 2013, came back in 2016, and I think I speak for Seth and myself when I say it's cool to come full circle and see somebody who was involved with this from the jump.
Well, it's pretty important, I think, because my parents, or my father is really the one. He lived in Detroit, and do you know the Trowbridge House on Jefferson?
Yes.
Okay, that's my family.
Oh.
My middle name, the T, is for Trowbridge.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh,
and some of the stuff I'm just learning. You don't pay that much attention
when
your
you're a
father's
kid.
telling you.
No.
And so I'm researching, and my cousins are telling things. The Trowbridge farm was on Woodward Avenue, and there's a Trowbridge Street on Woodward. And R.J. King from D-Business Magazine told me last year, he said, well, one of your relatives was the mayor of Detroit a long time ago. Long time ago.
Yeah.
So early 1900s or something. So
it's in your blood.
It's in my blood. My father was... he was a piano player. In fact, in his papers after he passed away, I found things. In 1938, played piano at Cliff Bell's.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Gave piano lessons at the house we lived in on Kirby, now the Center for Creative Studies. The house, of course, turned down, and now that's the Center for Creative Studies. I'd hear from people all the time said, I used to dance to Max Gail's bands when I went to school in Ann Arbor. And then Dad said that what he used to do, because everybody wanted Max Gail's band, was he just put together more bands, and pretty soon he was becoming, as he had children, becoming a booking agent. Gail and Rice, they're still here in Detroit, and deep roots in Detroit. His office was in Detroit for many years. He had an office supply store in the Penobscot building for many years that we had to work in when we were growing up, and so the roots. Most people in Detroit have deep roots. You'll find that I ask people all the time. It might be someone that's 80 years old or something, and I'll say. It might be someone your age, and I'll say, but I'll bet your parents lived in Detroit, and they'll say, yeah, they did. They've told us stories about when they lived in Detroit.
That's one thing I'm a little jealous of. My parents have lived here a long time, but they're transplants. My mom grew up in St. Louis, and my dad grew up Alaska, Colorado, Oklahoma, all over. And I was always jealous of the kids that had all their cousins here and all their generations, because that's the norm in Detroit, is the
really
generation.
is, yeah.
So, my parents didn't move here till, I guess it was 1956 or so. So it's still a long time, but...
So you're creating your own roots.
Yeah,
and what I say is that,
exactly.
There's all the people that have been here and stayed here and never gave up. There's all the new transplants that have come and are creating their own legacies and roots.
I think that's true.
It's a tapestry.
Yeah, and I think my parents had the energy of hey, if we're going to be here, we're going to embrace it. And they always took us to the city, whereas some people who had grown up here, their parents were more no, we're not going to go into Detroit.
So
even
growing up downriver, your parents would bring you to ball games?
All the time, yeah.
See, I love hearing
Symphony,
that.
and yeah. So...
Well, I always felt, even when we started saying nice things about Detroit, and I don't really say started because it kind of evolved, I used to always say, and I still say it, wherever you live, work, or play, all over the world. If you have a nice story to share about Detroit, then share it. That's what Say Nice Things About Detroit
that's a
is
good
all
way to
about.
put it.
That's why I think that what they're doing with the city, with the stories, it's just this. Mike Duggan used to hang out in the store. Mayor Duggan. So, Detroit,
kidding.
Detroit Homecoming last year at the reception, I caught up with Mike and we gave a hug and said hello, and we were laughing, and then when he did his speech to welcome everybody at the reception, he just said hello to Emily, and who would have ever thought 35 years ago when she had a balloon in her pigtails and we're all eating ice cream and hot dogs, where we would be today.
Well, let's tell the story. Let's go back to the store and how you got involved in retail and how did this all start?
Well, I grew up in retail. My father was a retailer, office supply store, downriver, Gail's Office Supply in Wyandotte.
I went there all the time for our supplies.
When we were little kids, we'd have to go to work and, didn't love it then. But
Gail's is
we
the
grew
best.
to kind of like it. And he had a store in the Penobscot building as well. And I worked for him. And, it's tough working for your father. And there was a little space in the Penobscot building below where he was that opened up. And it was a 9x12 room, so not much bigger than this table that we're sitting at.
Right.
Wow.
And I took it. It was $160 a month rent. And it was right at the bottom of the stairs of the Penobscot building on the bottom floor where the Caucus Club was. And those days were very similar to what was the advertising show that was on? Mad Men?
Mad Men.
Mad Men.
Yes. Yeah.
And which I never watched. And then I saw the second to the last show because I have a brother who's an actor. He was in the second to the last show. And they were doing the marathon of shows, the 24 hours. So I watched them. I was like, oh, this is exactly what the Penobscot building, the Chop House, and the Caucus Club was like in the 70s and 80s.
Well, that paints a picture for people. Okay,
So I had this little 9x12 room, and I would go out and buy product at a place called E.L. Rice at night, and then bring it in, put them up on the shelf, little knickknacks, and it was during the era that Height Overnight started. Do you ever remember? They're here. They're out now. They're a photography company. But Height Overnight, people were using Instamatic cameras, and Height Overnight was you drop your film off at a place to be processed, and you could pick it up the next day. Your pictures would be processed.
I do remember that. Yeah, the overnight
and
photo prints.
It was big news then.
Yeah.
And my father's office supply store had been a camera and office supply, so I knew a little bit about cameras or film processing. And that was the hook. Was people would buy their film on Friday, they'd drop it off on Monday, and pick it up on Tuesday. So I had them in this 9x12 room store that about 6 people could fit in, but they'd stream in and out to buy their film, drop it off. You get to know them really well because you got their name, and it was a relationship thing.
Yeah.
And that little store, we moved a lot of little product out, and it was, it wasn't like by design, what were we doing? It was pulling along behind us, which is kind of the way I've done things all my life.
Okay, right.
So, if you're trying to send some kids to college, it's probably not the best way to do things, but
I'm with you.
And then I opened up, there was a Canadian company that bought the First National building back in the 70s, and they were the big noise about what they were going to do with the First National building and really putting some energy into it because things were rough around. And
just for some context, what's the feeling in the city of Detroit at that point?
What was
just
the vibe
after the riots and everything?
I would say it was, there were a lot of protests, Kennedy Square, it was all kinds of protests, the missile systems, all kinds of things that would go on. It wasn't a vibrant place.
Right.
It was pretty, what can I say, just kind of urban without a lot of pizzazz to it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, people came into work and left.
Exactly,
and that was it.
yeah. And somebody mentioned to me, I was doing a radio show the other day, and they said, do you remember everybody had on three-piece suits and wingtips? And now you never see that.
True.
You do a little bit in the Renaissance maybe, or that, but the dress attire, everybody was always dressed pretty formally. Because
Hats
it was,
and all those things,
And so that's a great question. What was the mood? And so we opened up this little store in the First National building. I had a sister that was working with me. It was about 500 square feet. And once again, I put on, I had been an office worker where everybody had signs up, no food allowed. So people would walk through the hallways, they wouldn't go into the stores, and pretty staid kind of office building things that happened. And I had signs up, food allowed, so they would walk in with their sandwiches and eat.
Brilliant marketing.
That is
and then about a year or so later, what I didn't like was I was in a building where everybody had parameters. You can sell this, they can't sell that. Oh, that person's selling that, and they're not supposed to. And when the Renaissance Center opened about 1974, all the financial district, which is over where the London Chop House is now. It was in the Penobscot building, the Buell building. That just drained that area. Every building was emptied out at street level. So you just had all a bunch of empty
Ghost
storefronts.
What I've heard about the Rensen back then is that people, you kind of came in and stayed in the building.
Oh,
and
yeah,
it
you
was
weren't here
closed off.
before the berms came down. So
Right.
there were literally concrete berms surrounding it. It was like a fortress.
Wow.
So when GM came in and made it their headquarters, they changed all that, opened it up. So when I worked at the Rensen, there was concrete berms. This was in 92. And behind the Rensen was a parking lot next to the water.
Exactly.
There was
And it
no
was
river
designed.
walk. It was
Right.
designed to be like you enter into this citadel and
And it
you
was a
stay there.
fortress.
And then there was all kinds of stores in there.
And here's the thing. It was designed by a gentleman by the name of John Portman, who also designed Peachtree in Atlanta.
Yes.
He was the big noise. So whatever he decided was going to happen, he was the big noise in that era. And they put
They
up-
thought it would save the city, right?
Exactly. And the whole idea was that they had these ramps that you would, you'd stroll through and decide what restaurants you wanted to eat. And well, people didn't stroll through. They just wanted to figure out how to get to
It
their
was
offices.
so confusing. Yes. When I came out of college and I was like, shoot, I got placed in the Rensen. Like, I was so scared. Like,
I
where do
still
you
think
find
it's
your-
confusing.
It is. It is.
And
Because
it's improved now. They opened it up.
And
but
those
yeah.
berms were really something else.
Yeah.
And they even had little placards in the hotel rooms that suggested people not walk over to Greektown, not go outside of the building.
Really?
Wow.
So what was the mood of the city and stuff? That was very much the mood of the city, and it was called murder capital of the world.
Yeah.
Detroit, murder capital of the world. And
Yeah.
so it was a pretty unhappy. I didn't really buy into that because I was just enthused and,
How did you keep up that enthusiasm when
stay
everyone
positive,
around
yeah.
you? Yeah. That must
I
have
don't
been.
know. Just in hindsight, I don't know.
You don't
I just grew up with it. My dad was
Yeah.
always, I remember, my mom would always had a line she would use. I felt sorry for myself because I had no shoes till I met a man who had no feet.
Right.
Yeah.
You always keep it in perspective, kind of thing. And you're enthused about what you're doing. When you get whether it's the radio show or whatever you're doing, you have a certain passion that you stay. Is the glass half full or half empty?
Yes, that's
It's
true.
always half full, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if you wake up in the morning, there's a lot to be happy about.
You've already got a glass.
Yeah.
So, but the murder capital of the world and Rensen, that was a tough one. One of the first promotions I ever did in the Rensen, well, we created a foot race. It was the very first foot race ever put on in the streets of Detroit.
Really?
And I went up to WJR and I was promoting it. And when I got back to the store, Jim Bannon had a car waiting for me. He was the police chief at the time, or the assistant chief, whatever. Said, "Hey, Mr. Bannon Chief Bannon wants to speak with you." I went up to his office. He said, "You can't be promoting a run in the streets of Detroit. You need to go out to Belle Isle. We don't have runs in the streets of Detroit." And I kind of started crying. I said, "But the whole idea of it, it's just like, we said when we were talking about it, was we want to showcase the city and take people through the city streets and through Greektown and down by the Soup Kitchen Saloon in Woodbridge, which is now down by the river
Gone,
walk." Yeah. And, after being pretty, I guess, dramatic about, what I wanted to do and crying, he said, "Okay, well, maybe we can work this out." And they gave us a parade permit.
So, Emily, a lot of people will cry to a police officer to get out of a speeding ticket. You cried to the chief to put on a whole race. That's impressive.
It really is.
We had 90 people, I think, in the first run.
Wow.
And
For then, that's great.
That's-
For then
That's
it was
pretty
great,
good.
and that run grew to 15,000.
They
We had a
became
lot of them.
huge,
Became
yeah.
a huge event, and it was the whole spirit of even that first race with the party afterwards. We didn't have awards where you stop it and you give awards. I closed the store on those days.
Right.
The whole idea was to run through the streets of Detroit, and when you went through Greektown, we had a Greek band out there. When you ran by the Soup Kitchen Saloon, Brian McDonald, who had Soup Kitchen Saloon, had a blues band, and the Woodbridge, which was their style, Old Shillelagh.
Oh,
They
yeah.
had their
Yeah.
stuff out there. So the run, all this kind of ties in together with the Rensen, because I remember really having to work to get permission to run behind the Rensen or
yeah.
under,
Yeah.
because
It's just
it
a
was so
parking
new
lot.
for them. And another promotion we did with the Rensen right after they opened, since we're kind of talking about the mood, because that was a statement. That the Renaissance Center was a statement of the state of Detroit, I think.
I agree.
And another promotion we did, because we were doing a lot of promotions for Tommy Hearns, And
the
Tommy
boxer,
was just starting to box, and
He just had an event last
yeah,
Saturday
they
night.
came back into
we
it.
talked about
He's
it,
hosting,
yeah.
but at that time he hadn't been a champion yet. He was a welterweight at that time.
Okay.
And so we convinced Kim. I remember the guy's name, Kim Chappell. He was the manager of the Westin Hotel. We convinced him to let us have the boxing workouts on the bottom floor of the Red Cent. They had all traditionally, Detroit had been a great boxing town.
Yeah.
But they hadn't had it for years. It had been the Gillette series, I think, way back in the 50s or something. And we convinced them that rather than having all the boxing fans go to Cobo Hall for the workouts every afternoon, how about if we had Tommy, and of course we were working with Emmanuel Stewart at the time to do this, that we set the ring up in the Renaissance Center. Tommy would do his workouts there, and so would Pepino Cuevas. That's, I think, who he was fighting for that first championship. And all the three-piece suitors would come watch the boxing workouts. But better than that, Ebony Magazine and everybody was there to cover it. Instead of them being over in Cobo Hall with just boxing fans, they'd be in the Rensen in this
Mixed
new
in.
building
Seeing
that
what's
was
happening in
looking to
Detroit.
get some publicity.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So a lot of crazy things. One time we set up a ring in the old Shillelagh.
Oh, wow.
For the workouts, and that was with Randy Cobb. Tommy was fighting at the
Wow.
time. Tommy and I have a lot of fun kind of reminiscing these things a bit. And we had to prop up the floor on the first floor because we had it upstairs.
Yeah.
And it was a ring that was real tight in the bar. And the whole idea was the old kind of feeling, the old days where people had a pitcher of beer and are sweaty. And
Yeah, right.
This is before
So,
even
yeah.
Rocky Balboa, which was years later.
Exactly.
If I ever teach a marketing class, I'm going to have you come in and do a guest lecture. If somebody who could successfully market the city of Detroit in the early 1970s, you got my
it.
vote.
Well,
Yeah.
no, it was survival. We were really trying to just get people
Just
to come out of the office buildings,
all.
come into the store, because they'd come out of their office buildings, they'd just march down to their parking lots.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And to get any kind of response from people. So everything was a bit of survival.
And what were you selling in the store? What were the big
At
sort
that
of
time,
items?
in the space that I had taken over, that was DuPont, probably about 2,500 square feet. I didn't remove all the little offices, so every little store, every little office was a store. One was a jewelry store, one was an art gallery. I wanted to be like a Crate and Barrel. I sold a lot of that look.
Okay.
And we had that look to things because I thought, I sell more expensive stuff. I won't have to sell as much, right? It doesn't
Good
work
philosophy.
It doesn't work that way.
No, not really.
So gradually, over a
You
period of
learned.
time, but I did put in I started giving away a Detroit T-shirt. We made, it had the Detroit T-shirt, which was this with the heart over the eye, and that was the first T-shirt. So I gave it away with a $10 purchase. T-shirts weren't popular in the 70s.
I was going to say that was not a thing.
It was not a thing.
Not a thing.
Now I wore very dressed on. I wore high top moccasins, rolled up pants, suspenders. I had.
I've seen the old
a few
pictures of you.
columnists write stories about she had no self esteem, but I was just trying to bring an energy to.
Yeah,
and it was
and you
also
were
the
like-
way I dressed. Quite
Fun,
frankly,
yeah,
it was
yeah.
the way I lived. So we gave it away, and the press said she had to give it away. Who would ever buy a Detroit T-shirt?
Right. So, what do you feel about all these clothing brands now?
Well, I
like
love it.
everybody's
And,
selling
the
a
thing
Detroit
about
T-shirt.
it is that I eventually turned my whole store into everything you can imagine that is Detroit on it.
Yeah.
I had sweatpants. There was a fashion writer, Tavi Stone, with the Detroit News, and she just couldn't get over the way I dressed. She said, "We got to dress you up." So she did one once. I think I might have posted that on Instagram where it says Emily of the '80s plays dress up. And
yeah.
It showed me. I had a leather sweater because all the people that worked at the store got leather sweaters.
Oh, okay.
It had a big E on it and had the stripes on the arm for how many years? Remember those old
Yeah,
buttoned
yeah.
up the front leather sweaters?
Yeah,
that people had?
cardigans, yeah.
The cardigans. And they had me dressed in a Halston dress. It was a great story, really, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
And then at the end it said, and she marched off. She probably changed her clothes. Well, say la vie. That's Emily.
So you gave away the first T-shirt, but then how did it catch on and become a thing?
Eventually, I could feel what people felt. And then we had been down in Florida in a January weekend or something. Everybody goes to Florida, right?
Right.
Snowbirds.
And you see everybody there that you recognize them. People were going, "Hey, Emily and Pooh, aren't you glad you're out of Detroit?" And we thought, we have a business there. We were thinking that, "Hey, yeah, nice to see you. Have fun." But we decided we needed to do something that people would have a different attitude when they went other places.
Right.
Not like we want to get out of here. And at the same time, most people got on the train over at the train station every weekend. Hundreds would get on the train and go to Toronto to get out of Detroit.
Oh.
Chicago too, I bet,
And
right?
Chicago, I don't remember that as much, but Toronto was the big
the big
noise.
one. Okay.
Get on the train, go to Toronto. This all weaves into that.
Okay.
So when we were in Florida, we decided, okay, we're going to do something about that. So we came up with the Say Nice Things About Detroit.
Oh.
We flew a banner. And I think I might have sent you that in the email this afternoon because I thought, I bet they
yes.
haven't seen that. But we flew a banner and it said, and we did it over Easter weekend. We lined it up over Easter weekend, and it said, went from Fort Lauderdale to Miami, and it said, "Hi Detroiters, enjoy Florida. Say nice things about Detroit, Emily."
I love it.
Okay.
That's amazing.
And we lined up with a friend of ours. I would love to reach him. I have to look up his name. Bill, that worked with UPI. And we alerted him. We were actually in Boston running the Boston Marathon on that day when it flew. But it hit the papers like it works, like UPI works, right? It's supposed to work.
Right.
And hit the papers. And the Detroit News ran it on the front page. And that really hit people. People
Yeah.
really responded.
So the first Say Nice Things About Detroit was in Florida.
In Florida.
Yeah, okay.
So
I didn't
from
know that.
and this is, it's, a lot of it is kind of murky in memory to me. But,
Sure.
but it was like, I was so positive anyway. People would come into the store and they liked coming in because it was always a good energy. And that was kind of what I instilled in the people that worked there. And we were very creative about everything to do it. We did from the way we wrapped presents to how we had, just everything that we did was different than being in a staid financial district.
Yeah, and you were the bright spot. So, of course, you
Halloween
were a magnet.
parties. We had Halloween parties where we all dressed up. That was unheard of down in the financial district.
Oh.
So 15, 20 employees dressing up in really good costumes was totally unheard of in that area.
Mm-hmm.
So I just gradually started putting more and more products in of the Detroit. And, most of it had this Detroit with the heart, from tumblers and mugs. And Tavi always made fun of the way I dress because I wore sweatpants that I used to get down at the athletic. I can't remember. They're down there on Michigan Avenue.
Okay.
They're still there. And because they sold them to high schools. Not many people wore sweatpants in those days.
No, it was more
It was the
for
Adidas.
sports.
It was always, what was coming in was the really nice Adidas,
Track
pants.
pants.
And matching jacket. And that wasn't me, So I started selling sweatpants and sweatshirts and hoodies, totally 20 years past when it had been popular, right? But people loved it. So, and then I got, the way I told you, I used to use milk crates, or melon crates is what I used. I used to go to the Eastern Market. I sold apples out in front of the store for 25 cents in a big crate, and it was honor system. These are the little things that we did. 25 cents, put it in, honor system. In a bucket. Everything was melon crates. We'd go to the Eastern Market and buy 50 melon crates at $0.25 a piece or something, Those were our displays. And then eventually I got a whole bunch of milk crates from Wilson or somebody. So our displays were really creative, but they were different, down in that area. And everything, the T-shirts would be, we had baseball jerseys, the ones with the colored sleeves.
Oh, yeah.
Everything you can imagine. And also a lot of kind of funny gifts, too, that kind of weaved into the Detroit items.
Okay.
And things started coming, most things were under $20. So my store went from sort of crate and barrel and really expensive things to, not going to work.
Right,
It's
just
funny
volume.
that you say that, because this is kind of an entrepreneur's journey where the company you think you're starting is never the company you wind
end
up
up.
with. It goes in a totally, it's happened even with this podcast.
Definitely.
It goes in different directions.
Well, I tell people, I did a speed mentoring the other day out at UAD. I went with someone that's with Detroit Homecoming, and we each talked to 6 young ladies, and they came. We sat in the chair, and they came through with and we speed mentoring them, and tried to tell them, what you're projecting now, it's not even going to be in your life, right? When it happens, and we all learn that, right?
Absolutely,
I'm a little
we do.
older, so I've learned a lot more. Everything that I've learned that makes sense to me, I learned from that didn't work.
Right.
Not because something did work.
For the first time you tried it.
I always say life happens in between all those plans, right? Which is why I tell everybody to quit making so many plans.
Right.
So to that point, how long was it after you opened the store that it essentially became a full-blown Detroit apparel store?
I'm going to guess a couple of years, good couple of years, yeah.
Which puts us when? In the
probably
70s?
into 70, let's see, I opened, I think, about 73 73 or 4.
Okay.
So probably about 76.
Okay.
77.
Yeah.
But more than that was the mood of the Say Nice Things had started to really catch on with people. And what I was saying to everyone was, I'm not going to try to convince people who don't like Detroit that they should like it. We want to be a heartbeat and the magnet and a place where people who feel good about Detroit can come in. And of course, we were getting busier as an ice cream parlor. We had put Stroh's ice cream in. Nobody bought ice cream initially because people were they were in their
they were in their
suits, right?
button-up suits, yeah.
So then eventually they would send their secretaries down to buy cups of ice cream.
Oh.
Right? And they'd take them back to their offices. And then little by little, because I was putting benches out in front and I had flower pots that were illegal according to the city the whole time we ever had them. You know, you just do things, right?
Right.
And that was pretty unheard of. The cafes you see outside now in the flower pots.
Yeah, there was nothing like that.
Nothing like that. Anywhere.
No. Wow.
You know,
that's for sure.
Our flowers in front of our place were probably the only flowers in downtown
the one
Detroit
bright
at the
spot,
time.
for sure.
Yeah. So eventually people would, they'd sit and eat their cups of ice cream on the benches, right? And then pretty soon people kind of loosened up and they'd get them in an ice cream cone. And then pretty soon the guys started realizing, wow, there's a lot of pretty girls walking by here. So they'd stand out in front and then eventually it just became, that sidewalk was packed in the afternoon.
So even then, to get the pretty girls to bring the guys.
Well,
That's why you don't see men's night at bars. You see ladies' night, but you don't see men's night.
I sold expensive furniture at the time,
wow.
butcher block tables and everything, and expensive jewelry. And there was a line of clothing called Emily Just Emily that I carried. Everybody thought it was my designs. So
Now, where was all this stuff coming from? Where were you sourcing this from?
I would go to the New York gift show or clothing stores, and what you do, Chicago Merchandise
Sure.
Mart.
Oh,
and
yes.
Always getting weird stuff, and some playful. Like I remember one thing that we had was called a walking dog. It was on everybody's probably seen it.
Oh, yes.
It's on a leash or a fake leash, but it's real stiff.
And it looks like you're walking your dog.
But it was very unusual when we had it. The first time we took it was to the Tigers' opening game. Okay, I found an old story about that the other day. And, it was pretty much expected that it was probably the people from Emily's that were doing that. Because we were kind of known for, as time went on,
and fun.
quirky things.
But it's interesting what you say. The concept was more like, I'm not going to pressure you in anything, but if you love the city like I do, join in. Here's a place you can gather. And then when you leave, say nice things when you're out.
Yes.
Where now I feel like you could go anywhere in the world and often you run into people in Detroit t-shirts or you hear people talking about Detroit. And it is more so about, hey, come on in and join us. Enjoy Detroit,
It's so
it. So
funny.
it's kind of
It's-
like the flip. It's like the natural
It's
progression
unbelievable, the
of what you
flip.
said. So how do you feel about it? It's got to be so
we are
gratifying.
and I still come across it now. People that say, "Oh, they don't live in Detroit; they're not Detroiters." Okay, there is a lot of that attitude.
Yeah.
I never felt that way. I was always saying, I don't care where you live, work, or play. There's
If
people
you
all
like
over
it.
this world that are Detroiters. They're doing great things.
Yeah.
There's people all over Birmingham and Allen Park and downriver that support Detroit and all kinds of things.
Oak Park.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whatever community it was. To me, it was
Yeah.
like we all need each other.
Yeah.
It's not like it can disappear
That's
just
how
because
I've
you're
all
going to
felt
ignore
too.
it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, at what point did you start to see other Detroit apparel move in to the city? Because now there's tons of
There's like
Detroit
10
t-shirts.
everywhere.
Probably after I closed.
Yeah.
I think Pure Detroit opened up then, but while I was open, there were not too many were really doing it, because,
So did you-
well, that's not true. Probably Silvers who moved in across the street.
Silvers. Yeah, I used to
We
go there,
attracted a lot of businesses down to that area just by what we were doing. The fact that we had food in it. And, people, that was pretty new for retailers to have food in their store. Borders, which was in Ann Arbor, they started putting food in their place.
Yeah.
So
Like
we were
cafe.
kind of the leader in that thing, it was an era that people didn't think that way.
Yeah.
You mentioned the store closing. What led to the store closing?
Right.
Well, what happened was in the mid '80s. We became very busy. We'd have 1,000 people go through that ice cream line in our heyday.
That's crazy.
And we knew how to move it through real quickly, and people would hang up. We had trivia questions. I gave juggling lessons.
Oh my God.
Keep them entertained while they were in
Yeah,
line.
we had a
Yeah.
big penny farthing out in front of the store that I'd get on, and this all weaves into it. One time we had all the elephants from the Ringling Brothers Circus, which would always go down. They'd go right to the train station, right? When the Ringling Brothers Circus came in, they go right to the train station. So we created a thing where we got some other people in the media, and we rode the elephants down Ford Street to Emily's, closed off the street, got lots of lettuce we invited everybody to come feed the Ringling Brothers.
Did you give the elephants the Stroh's ice cream or no?
We gave them lettuce. Appropriately, so they had their protein.
Careful
and people love that, but I've got a picture of Gunther Williams was the lion trainer at that time and the elephant trainer. He had great silver hair. He was very well known at the time. I have the most wonderful picture of me where he had me turn around and all the elephants were there and he had me turn around and all of a sudden people were going, gasping, and in the picture the elephant is over my head.
Oh,
right?
wow.
And I love that picture.
That's amazing.
And I was game for it, which is okay.
Of course you were.
Of course, yeah. I don't think there's much you're not game for.
So it became such a popular corner. I knew my landlord, who loved me, started getting a lot of requests about that space.
Okay.
And we thought that the people from McDonald's were looking at the space across the street, which had been a Merrill Lynch brokerage firm. So we were really friendly to them, and they hung out in the store for a month or so every day at lunch hour. Well, it turned out that they wanted our space. I think that probably happened as they were in there seeing the activity, thought, oh, they've got this kind of energy in here, it must be the space. And so my landlord took me to court to try to get us out. We won the first case, or they didn't win, and we dragged that on for 3 years, that case. In the meantime, they ended up opening across the street. But in the meantime, our landlord still had other people that wanted a space, so we had 30 days to get out. And people were like, oh, why don't you just open up elsewhere? But it doesn't happen that way. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so that was the end of Emily's. And we were struggling. People thought we were making a lot of money on our runs because we went from a handful of people to, 15,000, 16,000 people. And they said in their minds, oh, gee, $10 times, this many people.
But it costs a lot more to run.
So we were losing our house, and we always thought, you always think you're going to gain on it, right?
Yeah.
And the sponsorship was difficult in those days. We had sponsors, but most sponsors wanted to be involved in football, hockey, and baseball.
Sure.
Because they could go and have wine and dine their customers. Most people weren't runners in those days.
No, there was no cachet to the runs.
Yes, perfect word, cachet. And to get somebody to sponsor, Midas became a sponsor. Ford became big supporters of ours. They were in the Ren Cent. They supported a lot of things that Herb and I did. We did the One Lap of America road rally, and so we gradually got sponsors, but never to the degree that it was costing us to put an event on.
Sure.
And we were learning what it cost. We weren't computerized. Computers hadn't come out yet.
Right.
Everything we did was, it was before fax machines
just
even.
by hand.
And then eventually, probably about early 80s, Radio Shack came out with a computer. I borrowed $25,000 to buy that computer.
$25,000?
Wow.
And our phones probably hold 5 times as much as those.
at least.
But that's when we were all
times.
starting to learn how to do data input. Because as the race got bigger, you had to keep tracking of people.
The time.
I'm just sad. It makes me sad when you say Radio Shack. I needed to record the other day, and there was no Radio Shack to go to anymore.
They just went out of business.
So they were on Woodward Avenue at the time.
So when your store closes, that when you were like,
well, Herb and I had done the Ironman over on the Big Island of Hawaii.
Oh, it's
And that was in 1981. And the first event on the Big Island, we went over and did it. We would go to the Honolulu Marathon to promote the Emily Detroit run. We would rent a Ford convertible. And then we would put a big sticker on it that would be, Emily Midas Detroit Run, June 9th, to promote it. We would park it out in front of the Hyatt in Honolulu.
You were promoting it to the runners that were running
to people that were running the Honolulu Marathon.
Because they would come and run your race.
Yeah, and it was also, to try to get them to run a race, but more to get that more national exposure.
Yeah,
right?
just...
Right, okay.
So we were reading a Sports Illustrated story about the Ironman that had been on Oahu and only had 13 people in it.
Really?
That's how it started, with
13 people.
Yeah, it started with the folklore is that it started with a bet, but it's John and Judy Collins, who are good friends of mine now. They were all at a banquet for some swimming event, and they were kind of talking about who is better, the runners or the swimmers or the bikers.
Oh, sure.
So they combined 3 events that went on during the year. And let's combine all of them.
That's how it began.
That's how it began. So we went and did it in Honolulu. I had just become a runner about a year or 2 before. We didn't tell anybody we were going to go do the Ironman. We trained. And
you became a runner and then completed an Ironman within a year.
Well, maybe a couple of years.
So my husband's a triathlete. He's competed in many, and I see how he trains, and he was a swimmer his whole life. I don't know how you figured that out in a year.
Because your husband's probably thinking, I want to be up at the front, and I have a goal of how I wanted to do it. All we wanted to do was to finish
Well, still.
And we were running a
Wow.
contest. We ran a contest with Ford. We convinced them to help us with the contest. And those were the days of when the American Airlines, all the airlines had desks in the hotels.
Oh, yeah.
right. Yeah.
Okay. So we had American Airlines, Ford, and I can't remember who else. So people could go into a Ford dealer, go to a American Airlines desk, and they could try to guess my finishing time.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
the one who guessed the closest to my finishing time won an all-expense-paid trip to Honolulu, or to the Ironman the next year, and worked in the press room and stuff like that. So yeah, I was one of the first females. We were one of the first couples.
Yeah.
In '81. Now we still had the store then, and we still had the runs. It looked like things were going to be good, right? Okay, this run, we're going to eventually get sponsors, and we're going to get out of the red with all of this. And then in '84, or '85, whenever it was, when we lost the store, the run was in its heyday. We ended up, the people that were putting on the Ironman would come to our races for a week during the event to see how we were doing things. Because remember, they were new at it too.
Yeah,
we
they
were
had just
all
started.
new at it.
Right.
No
Yeah, it was
cities had runs. Wheelchair participants weren't allowed to race in the Boston Marathon in those days.
Yeah.
We were one of the first to allow wheelchair participants. We called it the Ironsides Division.
Oh,
I have some great
great.
photos with 35 people at the front,
I need to start keeping a list of all the things you started.
I know,
All the
right?
things you
There's a lot.
I was the first at this, and then
And I gotta tell you, I keep a list.
Right.
Well, you should. I
It's in
mean,
her
you're-
little notebook she carries
Yeah.
around with her.
now I see how
know
you
it.
did an Ironman because your energy is just like
Well,
off the charts.
It was the Jackson 6 originally. It was,
Yeah.
So
Holy moly.
Valerie called me, who was the owner of the Ironman, and they used to come spend a week with us and see how we did things. It might be a simple thing like all the T-shirts that we gave to volunteers. Because our party was so popular, we never had awards. You came into the store on Monday and got your awards. Our whole race was about running through the city streets. One of our races even went through Tiger Stadium, started on the rooftop of Cobo Hall, went through
cool.
Tiger Stadium, and we ended up buying tickets for the ball game. Everybody got a
nice.
kazoo. Went in, sat in the bottom. Tom Monahan came down and led a rendition of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." So Valerie, who owned the Ironman, and the only reason Valerie owned the Ironman was that when it started, they had a fitness center called the Nautilus Fitness Center. So just like every little event that starts, they probably tossed in $1,000 or something, or said, we'll print the shirts. And when Valerie and her husband got divorced, he got the fitness center, she got the Ironman. Okay, she knew very little knew nothing about what to do. So we mentored her a lot in those early days. And then two people that were in the PR part that were really helping her, and one, they knew about PR and everything. They would come spend a week at the Pontchartrain and just follow us around everything we did. And
amazing.
took a lot of those ideas back to the Ironman. So a lot of the things that we did, even learning how to do a database, because that was so new. How do you print the things
track
out? What do
of
you want to
everything.
do? So we started keeping track of 89 different categories of work things that people
Wow.
did.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was really known for balloons. I had a lot of balloon arches. People didn't use them in those days. I mean, just a lot of balloons. Plus, I would blow up the big weather balloons, and we'd put them out in the crowd. And we got Fred LeBeau, who was the big name in running in those days because of the New York Roadrunners Club. Fred came to our Emily run. I still have video of him picking up the trash
Oh my
after the run.
gosh.
And Fred used to always make fun of me with the balloons. All your balloons, because even Runner's World wouldn't write about our run in the early days because runs were very... I used to always say the next laugh you hear at a run is going to be the first laugh you hear at a run.
Yeah. It was,
We weren't aiming at runners. We were aiming at softball players, people who'd never run in a run. We were aiming
Just
at people.
casual.
Yeah.
Come down to
casual.
Detroit and
Anyone
get to
can
know
do
your
it.
city. you know.
Yeah.
That's why it grew.
Enjoy
it wasn't
it,
a hardcore
yeah.
run. And the hardcore runners always ended up there anyway. In fact, one of the people that won our race several times, and I have a wonderful picture of her with the Fago sign in the background, and it was Lisa Weidenbach, who won the Boston Marathon before the lady won this year.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
she was the last American to
Yeah,
win up
in
until
the-
this
in the
year.
80s.
That's right.
and
Yeah.
she ran in our races, and we really supported Lisa. She was training and becoming a better runner, and going and running marathons and things like that. So we were part of her support crew. A little money or a little support, and she was because she started just running 10Ks.
The foresight that you had for all this marketing and ways to promote your events, you were doing this in a way that nobody had really thought of at that point, and that's what's fascinating me as a marketer.
Well, I have to say that in my mind, I flunked out of college, so I was
Really?
I had a rough time. I mean, I was a really good high school student, and I was always aspired to be an LPGA player, professional golfer.
Yes. Yeah,
I was
I
an
knew you were a
athlete
golfer.
before Title IX, so women weren't, it wasn't something that the people were patting you on the back because you were a
No.
great athlete.
Right.
There was more of a stigma to it, but so even with the store, it was more of a survival thing. I mean, I can't say, I was really creative and I sat down and I always say, if Pooh hadn't been in my life, most of that stuff wouldn't have happened. I mean, I was doing it before we met, but as a team, we were just fantastic
Together.
as
Oh,
together.
that's
And we were
cool.
inseparable. And one of the great stories I love is that, we were on Congress and Shelby next to the London Chop House. And on that street, Shelby, there's 2 buildings and there's a bridge that goes across.
Yep.
I think it's a dessert place now or something. Well, we always said we were the best battery in town. We carried these little mitts I had from 5th grade, everywhere we went, and we'd toss the hardball all the time. And I got video of that from TV shows when people, put those on and showed us playing catch. But after 6 o'clock and stuff, when we would be working late, we would end up throwing the ball and go further and further back on Shelby over those bridges.
Wow.
I used to love, and one of these nights, I'm going to go down there and see if I can.
That's athleticism.
I should explain to Seth and Becky, who are not sports fans, a pitcher and a catcher collectively are known as a battery. That's what she means.
I actually did know that.
Oh, you did
Yeah,
know
I
that.
did know
Seth
that.
did not.
So
I did not.
How did you
I-
meet? How did you?
Oh, well, that's an interesting thing. It was during Christmas time, and he came in, and we got chatting and flirting a little bit, and I said, what brings you, or started talking to him. He said, I'm heading up to Mackinac Island. He said, I'm taking a crew of people up there that are with travel agencies, and he was putting together a little group of people to buy the old college up there. I think it's a hotel now. There was the Grand Hotel, and then at the other end of the island, there was an old school, a college that was done during moral rearmament. It had a theater in it with translation booths. It had been closed for years. It was a huge place. And he felt Mackinac could be a winter resort. So he was taking travel agents up there. It was like, why couldn't it be a winter resort?
Yeah.
And they said, you want to come up? I said, no, but I wouldn't mind going afterwards because I'm really a loner. As much as I like people, I love being alone. And I spend a lot of time alone.
Okay.
I'm an introvert. People say that means
Really?
you don't like people. People think that means you don't like people.
No,
There's a
I know.
wonderful
Yeah.
TED Talk called Quiet, and I like everybody to hear about that because it's by Susan Cain, and she has the book. And she really explains that introverts like people. They just need a lot of quiet time and
To
alone time to
recharge.
recharge.
A lot of me
It's where
time,
you get
yeah.
your
Yeah.
energy.
And
Yeah.
extroverts like to get out to get energy.
See, that's weird because I'm an extrovert, but I hate people.
Yeah.
in that you like.
You hate a lot of stuff.
You're
Seth,
the
our
one that
resident-
doesn't like sports, right?
Yes.
He doesn't.
Yeah.
No.
He's our resident curmudgeon.
He
It's
doesn't
fine.
like much.
It's true.
So, the question you asked, how do I feel about it? Okay, there weren't that
Oh,
many
yes.
other shirts, and I think Pure Detroit was one of the first to kind of open
Yeah.
stuff. Last year, Our Detroit did a wonderful story, Jeff Warniak, and it was called The Evolution of the Detroit T-shirt.
Yeah.
And it had a picture of me, and he did a really nice story about how we started the first T-shirt and everything. And then he had pictures of 10 or 12 of the other shirts.
There's so many now.
There's so many
Oh,
now.
my gosh.
Well, here's my feeling, and what I put out to everybody is that even when I'm, promoting that Ink Detroit is making our product, and I'm trying to raise funds so I can curate all this old video I have.
Oh,
and
sure.
the photographs,
Yes.
and I've been spending a lot of time with the Detroit Historical Museum. Some of it should be in there.
Yes.
So I kind of have places I feel it should go instead of in a locker.
Right.
And now I'm really putting
that
more
takes
and more
time and
time
money
into
and-
curating it. So as I'm saying to people, you can go get your product, get a new T-shirt at the Detroit shop. Their slogan is part museum, part retail store, all Detroit.
Yes.
And all of their profits go to nonprofits.
Yeah, it's a wonderful model.
So they sell at Somerset. Now they're in the David Whitney building.
Yes.
And all of their things that they sell are like Fago or Detroit Historical Museum. And the monies go back to those organizations.
Yes.
I bought several things from the store on Somerset. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
one of my favorite places to look around when I'm in the mall. Yeah.
Well, now they're in David Whitney building, and they get that, they're taken care of with that rent and that space. And what I like about that is that building was, and I'm getting to the answer on your question, is It was developed by David DeRita of the Roxbury Group. And David DeRita also developed the Globe building where the Outdoor Adventure Center is.
Yes, it's great.
So I was doing a piece with Dave Llewellyn from Channel 7 last year. So Dave I knew years ago when he was trying to get into TV. So we're walking down Woodward last summer, I think it was, and filming something, and somebody stands off to the side, and I didn't recognize the person. But I acknowledged him, hi, and Dave Llewellyn said, hey, David, how are you? Well, it was David DeRita.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay?
Yeah.
He said, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just had to say hello to Emily. She gave me my first job.
Oh.
That's when you realize how long ago it was.
Whoa.
Scooping ice cream.
Oh,
Dave Llewellyn
my
said, what
gosh.
did you do? He said, I scooped ice cream. What'd you learn from Emily? Well, she always told us to be kind to everybody.
Aww.
And I loved it because I already knew about David DeRita developing the Globe building into the Outdoor Adventure Center, because when I read that was being done, I got in touch with the person that was going to be running it. Because Pooh and I used to hang out down that area. It's Riverwalk now, but it used to be gravel roads and everything else. But we used to run and ride bikes down there all the time.
Oh, yeah, it was wilderness.
So I reached out, and then when I found out that David DeRita designed it and then did the David Whitney building, which when the People Mover was being built, the David Whitney building was just trash. Everybody thought it was going to disappear.
Oh, yeah.
And they, why have a People Mover stop there? Who would have ever thought?
Yeah.
That, and the fact that he was able to develop it
and
put
it's
the hotel
beautiful,
in.
and the Aloft
So what
Hotel.
a contact.
Yeah. And then to know he worked for you at the ice cream.
And then knowing that the Detroit shop is in the David Whitney building. So David and I are meeting at the Buell Bar at 4 o'clock on Friday.
So let me ask, because you're not living here now. I mean, you've lived in Hawaii for a long time.
Well, when we went
now.
there, so what happened was Valerie recruited me to come out to be interim race director in the Ironman. Their race director had passed away. And she said, will you come out and be interim race director? And we went out, and we were broke. Didn't have a car. We had lost everything. It all kind of hit bottom.
Wow.
A lot of things happened, and not just losing the space, but the runs. I tried to do one more run. It was just. There were some other situations I think I mentioned to you earlier with an immigration issue that Herb had that was a technicality that got out of control with immigration.
So if you hit rock bottom, might as well go to the beach.
Yeah, exactly.
Be in warm weather.
Somebody
and,
offered us something.
A
Come out
job.
here and take.
Let me ask, after the store closed and you go to Hawaii, was there a period where there was no say nice things about Detroit, T-shirts or apparel or merchandise being made?
You let that
No
go.
merchandise being made, right.
Okay.
And it's amazing. I mean, people send me things all the time that like the other day, someone saw someone in Eastern Market with one from the 70s.
That's cool.
I mean, people are always sending things. But I always said I was going to shed a brighter light on things, get back here.
So when did you bring it back?
Well, I started about 10 years ago, just little by little, or maybe not quite that long ago.
Yeah.
Probably actually about 6 or 7 years ago. And just coming and doing my little thing, the same old style of being out there, right? And making it more visible and starting to print some shirts. And Historical Museum was the first place, and Outdoor Adventure Center, the two places I wanted them. Because I love what Outdoor Adventure Center is doing.
It's
I think
really
it's
great.
so fantastic. And Detroit Historical Museum, it just seemed like a very logical place because I knew I had these archives and everything. What I realized was I didn't need to shed a bright light on it. It was in the hearts of people.
Yeah,
I mean, I would be standing on the street corner and people come up and, are you Emily? I mean, it's just amazing to me, because I don't have pigtails and I'm 45 years older than I was then, But it just astounds me, It'll be somebody will say, are you Emily? Yeah. Oh, when I was 11 years old, I ran in your race. Or my dad used to bring me into the store every day. Here's a story I like that I think is kind of typical of it. I was out at the D in Las Vegas. I always wanted to go see those people.
Oh, yeah.
Because I would hear it advertised all the time. I thought, I'll go in and see who owns the D in Las Vegas. So I went in, and the bellhop told me, he said, the owners... they weren't there when I stopped during the day, and he said they're always at the end of the bar, the sports bar, and they're always holding court down there. So I came back at 7 o'clock. I wandered down to the end of the bar, and their name is Nicole and Derek Stevens, and big Detroiters, very involved in Detroit too, and they we're standing, she was sitting in a stool and he was in the bar, and I said, "Hi, Derek. I just wanted to say hello. I'm from Detroit. My name is Emily." And I just got it out. And Nicole went, "Oh my gosh, Emily, when I was a little girl, my dad would tell me if I was bad, he wouldn't take me to your store."
Oh.
And she just freaked out. We both had more fun with that. She said, "I can't wait to call my dad." And she said, "We still have a picture from your store in the house." So the whole thing about the T-shirts, the way I look at it, there's so many of them out there. And the way I try to put it out there as far as, great if you want to buy an Emily, say nice things about Detroit, rustic wood sign or mug or sticker, whatever you want to get. But more importantly is get the shirt that says about Detroit what you feel. Because there's one for everybody.
Emily, we've hit a point now where people are saying nice things about Detroit, and we've seen it a lot, especially in the last year. You've seen CBS This Morning, you've seen the New York Times travel section, you've seen Lonely Planet, you've seen article after article.
Food and wine.
Right, with people talking about what a great city and everything that's going on here. I mean, what do you think now when you look at what's happening in the city?
How do you feel?
I like it. I always say to everybody, it's really great, but let's remember that all that glitters is not gold for everybody.
Right.
Okay? And so I feel very strongly about that. Me
too.
I love when I pull up to a stoplight and somebody goes, "Emily, you started all this,"
That's
And
cool.
I mean, it's really great.
Yeah.
Jim Hayes from Detroit Homecoming always says that too. They give me a lot of credit at Detroit Homecoming. But there's still people that don't say nice things about Detroit.
Oh,
But,
sure.
there's enough good press. Sometimes the press is, people come in and they get kind of a cursory look at Detroit.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a lot of very thoughtful things. I think it's all good. And the way I look at the city of Detroit is the same way I look at myself. And this is how I explain it to people. I have a lot of shortcomings I'm working on. But I don't need my friends to be telling their friends about that.
Words to live by right
that's so
there.
good.
They can talk about my positive things. And in Detroit is the same way. It always was that way. It wasn't that it's perfect. Say nice things about Detroit. And meanwhile, we're all doing a lot to work on that needs some effort.
Well, Emily T. Gail, co-creator of the Say Nice Things About Detroit movement, thank you so much for coming in and telling us all this stuff. I mean,
It's
the history is
priceless.
fascinating.
It's really priceless. And thanks for supporting us, too.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
thank you.
And
Well, I love what you're doing. I mean, when you give those events, it takes time to do that
Yeah.
research. It takes time to know what's going on, and all of you, your energy is good. I mean, you're taking people that are doing some pretty interesting things, and you're showcasing them in really wonderful, lively ways. And
Well,
I
thanks
tell
for
everybody about the
energizing
debrief.
us.
Well, and that's high
Thank
praise
you.
coming from you,
Yeah,
Emily.
yeah, I
So
know.
thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. All right.
I loved it.
Well, thank you, and we'll talk to all the rest of you next week.
The debrief.
Your guide to Detroit's arts and entertainment scene.